Rishi Sunak will be hoping that in putting David Cameron back into government will help to give an air of credibility, a sign, if nothing else, that this is a departure from everything that went before it.
Now the dust has settled, what did you make of yesterday? What we've heard about whether this might not affect the polling, but it was a significant move by Rishi Sunak nonetheless, perhaps one of the only significant moves he can make.
Yeah, and I think it's the last point of the three things that John Curtis was saying that people care about there, where the Tories hope that this will make a shift happen. And it's the idea that in lockdown, there were parties and the government was being run very badly. I think of all of the things, the economy, the health service, and that particular perception, this is the one where Rishi Sunak will be hoping that in putting David Cameron back into government will help to give an air of credibility, a sign, if nothing else, that this is a departure from everything that went before it. The problem that Rishi Sunak has is that he has spent a long time pursuing a very different strategy and telling people this is what's going to get us elected. It's also the type of Prime Minister that I am. And I think the fact that he's now changed track, and he has done that with the appointment of David Cameron, no matter what happens with the other appointments, this is what's going to dominate the narrative. What it's actually doing, this reshuffle, is exposing a lack of narrative from Rishi Sunak, even more than the conference speech, even more than the King's speech. And if you continue to do that, even when you make changes, it just won't shift the dial.
And I guess the problem is also, can just the competence argument, which is really what we're talking about here the whole time, is by its very nature kind of boring. It's like, we're not going to screw things up. And if you've got quite a competent looking leader of the opposition, plus you're 25 points behind in the polls or 20 points behind the whole, simply arguing the case that we're quite centrist and boring and competent might be quite a good intellectual argument, but it doesn't feel like it's going to really shift the dial.
Well, it can sometimes be a motivator for people to vote. It depends on their circumstances. If people feel like they are, really struggling, they can't move house, they're not getting paid enough, things are insecure, they may feel more inclined not to make a change if they think the government is stable, it is a little bit boring, but it is trying to do its best. What that argument relies on, though, is that things are improving. So the government has to be able to show that we're putting more money in your pocket, we're giving you tax cuts, or the situation in the wider economy is improving because of what I am doing. Those two things have to run together in parallel. You can't have one without the other. And it's why actually the reshuffle is really important right now and will continue to be. But what will become more important is what happens with the economy in the next couple of weeks in the autumn statement, because that will be, for many people, a much bigger signal about whether this is the type of government that they should keep, vote for and have trust in.
Just finally, this question of the right wing of the party, how troublesome can they be? We've got Jacob Rees-Mogg on in about half an hour's time. Andrea Jenkins submitted a public letter of no confidence, one of the worst pieces of writing I've ever read, I think.
I saw you being mean about the punctuation.
It's just like it was written by drunk Siri. I just couldn't believe it. But anyway, she's out. She's out on Rishi Sunak. We often talk about the right of the party and how much he's in hock to it, how much, Asma's trying to find out how right-wing is the country. Is this a problem for him that by getting rid of Suella Braverman, that sort of culture war-y right-wingness has been dismissed from the cabinet? Is that a problem for him, either in terms of what they'll do in Westminster or the narratives to the nation?
It's always been a problem for Rishi Sunak, and it goes back to the first thing that we were talking about, which is that if you don't really articulate clearly who you are and what you stand for, it's very difficult to reinforce what your values are as a party. And that's where this conversation about the right wing comes in. John Curtis is right that the right wing isn't one thing in the Tory party. It's a load of disparate things. And in terms of what's happening this week and what will happen next, Suella Braverman is going to see what happens on Wednesday with the Supreme Court decision on Rwanda. That is a huge moment for the government. And expect if it goes against them, she will have a huge long list of meetings, of missed opportunities, of things that she thinks the government has done wrong, which has led them to this point. She's also determined to leave the ECHR, so expect to hear that. Basically, that is a hinge point for her to use as a springboard to start making the case for what she believes could have been done differently, and then the Supreme Court judgment would have gone differently. Now, whether that's true or not, it will be the basis for the argument. We are in a moment now where that right-wing group are pausing to see what happens next and to see what Suella Braverman does next. But it all goes back to the same problem, which is that actually Rishi Sunak does not differ too much from what Suella Braverman thinks. The language isn't the same, but the ideology is quite similar. It's just that most people in the country don't recognise him as that. And actually most people in his party don't recognise him as that. And when people cannot understand who you are, what you offer and what you're standing for, well, then you get into all these kinds of arguments and you can be pulled from pillar to post. And I think that's what we're starting to see now after this reshuffle. And it will be for the Prime Minister to really determinedly, today at Cabinet and beyond that, set the direction.